Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Good to see you out there on Facebook and YouTube. We are going to begin letting in our live audience here on Zoom, and we'll get started with the program in a minute. Welcome everyone to the live Zoom call. Good to see you all. I see Scott there. I see Bill, and I see, who else do I see? Scott, Bill, Stephen. Yeah, good to see you guys. And we will just about to get started here. And if you haven't been here before, if you're out there on Facebook or YouTube, keep an eye out for links in the chat for Facebook and YouTube. When you see those, you can click on it and you can then join the Zoom call if you so desire. You can participate in the conversation. Everybody's welcome to participate, no pressure. You can add questions and comments in the chat. You can say something, you can raise your hand. Audio only, a video, whatever you like. If you got out of control, I'll cut your feet. That's all. So, all right, let's intro the program and get some context here. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour. We gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You can also subscribe to Radio Hour for just $16 a month. You get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, as well as all the archival recordings of over 200 episodes in our member area. You can join Piano Tech Radio Hour at the link bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. And make sure I guess we got me. I think maybe Justice helped spotlight the video of myself and our guest today. Also, remember, our radio hour comes out as a podcast. That's audio only, so you miss out on the video unless you're a member. But the really cool thing there is you can listen while you're driving in the car, working in the workshop, working out, doing dishes, all those things people do when they're listening to podcasts, working in the garden. You tell me. It's always fun to just podcast. So check that out at pianotechradio.com. You can find it on Spotify, Apple, iTunes. And by the way, iTunes, we've seen ratings in the top, 110, even sometimes number one in the performing arts category on iTunes in countries all over the world. So hello to everyone out there in this planet, this lovely planet that we have. Holding hands peacefully in our musical appreciation. I would like to also mention our blog for Piano Technicians Masterclasses. Check that out on Substack. You'll find out some very fascinating information about pianos and music. We do everything from the advanced piano information, where you're talking about, historical actions or advanced voicing techniques or concert preparation or construction of pianos. Our most recent masterclass was with a fellow who was a musician, Daniel Massetti, who plays period piano, but has also developed this amazing expertise in sort of the historical piano actions. So he was showing us all these actions and all the damper mechanisms and how he thinks about pedaling and all, and in all these different genres and throughout history. So really great stuff. Pay attention. We have on the third Thursday of every month, we've got a live masterclass. You should tune in. Also follow us on socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Let's intro today's guest. Today's guest is Daniel Ching. Daniel is a founding member of the Grammy-nominated Miró Quartet and a longtime force in the world of chamber music. He began playing violin at the age of 3. That's insane. Eventually training at top conservatories in San Francisco, Oberlin, and Cleveland. As a performer, he's helped shape the Miró Quartet's distinctive sound, bringing together deep musical insight and a background in recording engineering. Alongside his work on stage and in the studio, Daniel teaches at the University of Texas at Austin. Austin's been quite the up-and-coming location over the past decade or so, where he mentors the next generation of string players and chamber musicians. Daniel, Ching, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Thank you. Quite the intro.
Hmm,
I have to admit that
all you.
with the title of the piano tech, I feel a little bit like an imposter. I hope you don't have too
Hmm.
many questions for me regarding pianos and actions and things like that because I don't really know anything about that. So
Well, so that's the thing that my first question was, what do you do if the sostenuto's out of whack on a Steinway
well,
B?
I
That's what I was curious.
discard that piano and I get another one.
Call the piano
I
technician.
I call the local shop and local Steinway and make sure they roll in another one with a working sostenuto pedal. So
Awesome. Well, no, my first question is a softball, I guess, because it's all about you and your life. I love to go back into, I'm imagining young Daniel Ching in the crib in the nursery with a violin. I mean,
yeah,
3 years
yeah.
old. My son, I think, started his cello at maybe 4 or 5. All they would have him do is hold the bow,
Right. Well,
do little exercises.
that's the hardest
Um,
thing.
and the cutest, the instruments are so cute
They're
when they're
very
young
cute.
kids and you have the tiny little versions of everything.
Yeah.
So gosh, you must have these sort of like almost like vague magical memories of music at that young age. Tell us about what you remember and what you don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do have a little bit of a story in terms of starting that young. Um, you know, being a parent myself, starting an instrument at that age when you're not really, I mean, you're asking for toys and candy, and you're not asking to play an instrument. Maybe you are, but I grew up in a musical household. My father was a professional violinist, and that was in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. He played in the local orchestras and also taught. But actually, he when I was three and a half, he was the one that started me, and I think I was one of his first students, and he went on to just have a very long teaching career. He's almost 88 now and only stopped teaching just a few years ago in
Wow.
the area. Yeah, so um,
Was it like Suzuki method? Was there something else or
he it was kind of his own thing. He used the Suzuki books and but he wasn't like Suzuki certified or anything like that. But I
okay.
did, have some exposure to some of those that kind of teaching. But the story I like to tell about you're talking about the little violin. So I um born in San Francisco, this was back in the 70s, gives my age away a little bit here. And one of the first in the old days, babies would be kept in a, kind of like newborn ward, all the like 30 or 40 babies would all be in one room. And so the parents would be allowed to be, to see their baby, making sure you're looking at the right one. And because they would keep the babies there, I guess, for couple days or something just to make sure everything was okay. And
Monitor.
yeah, and one of my first baby pictures that he took of me was, he had brought the camera in and I'm lying in the crib and he's taking it from above, so I'm lying there like this, but I'm not the only thing in the crib. He had brought a 1/32 size violin, which is about yay big, like this, seeing it, but like tiny little thing, and he had brought it in and put it next to me along with the bow, and that was my first baby picture, and I still have this picture. And I always joke about, like, it's the size of the violin, and I was the same size as the violin in day one. So he
Wow.
probably he probably took that violin every day and was checking to make sure, it went from being this big on me, and then finally as I grew, three and a half was when he, when it could fit under my chin and I could play it. And
Wow.
yeah, but yeah, so that's how that started, is because my father, being a musician himself, he wanted his children to play, not knowing where it would go, where it would lead to. And obviously,
Hmm.
I fell in love with it. I had an
Hmm.
affinity for it, and really just it really took hold. Yeah, so my sister and I both started on violin and piano on both instruments, and she went the route of piano, and I went the route of the violin. So we're both professional musicians.
Hmm.
So
Wow. Fascinating.
that's how that started.
Fascinating. That leads me to a question. So, like I said, I have a young son. He's 7 years old now. He's been doing cello for many years. Um, He's definitely at the stage where I don't want to go to cello, Oh, do we bring you or not? Do we let you change your instrument?
Yeah.
But he still likes it though. He still goes and he still practices and
Good.
he's great at performing. He doesn't really get nervous or anything like that.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm curious of your perspective about that um, the sort of parental involvement, right? Because
Mm,
it's one of those things where we educate our children generally, music or sports or some, things that most children don't get education in. The parent
right.
almost has to have some sort of direct involvement, and that can be a good thing. It could be a stressful thing, like what they don't know what's going on. They might like dinosaurs and that's it, right? But you're
Right.
you're you're giving them a musical instrument. So I know you have kids, and what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that? Like the role of a parent in this? How much are they actually shaping this for the child, or just kind of really strongly giving them a foundation in case they want it? What do you think?
How much time do we have to talk about this? we
Yeah,
can we can go on
probably.
and on about it,
Yeah, we
but
could talk to your therapist about
right.
it.
Well, it's but besides music, I'm also a big sports fan. So
Yeah.
I kind of look at those two very similarly because um there are the professions that require fine muscle training, especially
Hmm.
from an early age. I think about gymnastics. I think even, basketball players and,
Hmm.
and whatnot, the earlier you get that training, obviously, most likely you're going to be better at it because a lot of it is very hard. Like a Tiger Woods started when he
Hmm.
was very young. That it's very
Hmm.
hard to learn those little things. So, string playing, instrument playing, is
Hmm.
very similar. Because again, I know people who have started later, and it's just a little bit. It takes a little bit more work, and it's not
Hmm.
maybe not in as quite innate. So, how you equate that to what parents can do? I think the role of the parent really is to kind of encourage the youngsters to stick with it. And you have your 7-year-old who's nearing that moment of like possibly no return. But I have to say that I have met many, many people who don't play instruments who I would say 99% of them say, I wish my parent kept
Hmm.
me kept me going because
Hmm.
there is that brief period where maybe playing an instrument is not cool or
Yeah.
playing this, I'd rather be outside with my friends than practicing. But
Hmm.
that's really only a few years, and then later after that, the ones that stick it through, they really stick with it and love it. And it's not that we need to create more professional musicians, but just to have that ability, or just to have that something that you have besides you might be a lawyer or a doctor, but play on the weekends, which there are many of. Um,
Yep.
and so I think just kind of keeping it's no different than taking your kid to soccer practice or whatever. There are times when they just don't want to do it,
Yep.
but they'll be happy later when oh, dad or mom, thank you for helping me through that period because now I can go play on the weekends soccer or basketball
Hmm.
with my friends. I don't necessarily have to be a pro. It's very hard to do that, but I can enjoy it. I have something else in my life that I can be, because frankly, a hobby is much more fun if you're good at it. And when it comes to you know, string playing, piano playing, instrument playing, and again, I equate it to like a lot of sports. It's the younger you start and the more hours you spend while you're young, that's when your muscle memory is being formed. And so I mean, it's of course a balancing act between getting the kid out the door to the lessons and making sure that you don't push so hard that they actually hate it. That
Yeah.
it is I had that experience with, I have two grown, now they're teenage sons, and they both had piano lessons and cello lessons, and they both love to just play around on the piano. And I
Hmm.
think without us pushing them a little bit when they were younger, they wouldn't have had the ability, and now they can sit down on the piano and improvise and have fun and enjoy it, and they're good at it. So yeah, so it is and every parent child relationship is different, so
Yep.
it really, in my case, what you asked about my memory of it, I didn't. I had a father who pushed pretty hard. He really wanted me to be a violinist,
Hmm.
and so it was just something for me. During my young years, it was something I had to do. Like I had to do my homework and I had to practice, and it was just
Hmm.
it was not really a choice at those moments, and the choice came
Mm-hmm.
later. I
Mm-hmm.
could have, there were of course rebellious times when I was very interested in film as a teenager. I loved writing my own scripts and thought maybe I'd go into film,
Mm.
which ironically my son is studying now in college, and so he pushed me, and but also at the same time it was something he got into a place where I was not. He didn't push me so hard that I hated it because I could
Yeah.
have easily went the other way and said, I don't want to touch the violin ever again when I go to college or whatever. And
Right.
and then and when I was 10 years old, separate story, I was introduced to chamber music, and that's where my love for string quartet playing came from, was really early on as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so the two of them, the love for chamber music and being able to play violin well came together, and that's really actually the reason why I'm still playing in a quartet that I helped to found 30 years later, is
Mm.
because of what happened early on. So yeah, things that were happened in my childhood make a lot more sense to me now. They didn't
Sure.
always make sense to me when I
Yeah.
was a kid, but they make a
Yeah.
lot more sense, and especially now that I'm a parent as well.
Yeah. The one thing you said, and we'll probably go to other topics, maybe come
Yeah.
back to this because this is definitely fascinating.
Hmm.
But the one thing that you said that stood out to me is I didn't have a choice. And you could take that negatively, but I
You
feel
could,
like
yeah.
just in life in general, things go
Hmm.
better sometimes when you don't have a choice.
Yes.
Like if you know you just have to do this and you can't say no or whatever, it's a lot easier than if there's some possibility that you're not going to.
Right.
Whether it comes down to exercise or, especially when you
All
get
that.
into an adulthood and you have to manage your own choices and putting yourself in a situation where you don't have a choice. I'll just say one example and then we could go on someplace else, whatever.
Yeah.
But I remember I actually purchased a house quite young. I was out of college.
Mm.
I was in a band. And
Fun.
the market had went crazy, so anybody could get a house. And I was like, I think I'm going to do this. I knew it was a crazy time. I was smart enough to say I would take
Yeah.
advantage of this and get an
Yeah.
investment.
Very
So
smart.
yeah. And I was in a band, a guitar player, drummer, and a piano player myself,
Uh-huh.
and bass player. And I tried to get everybody to go in on it, but come on, you're trying to get musicians to make a responsible decision like invest in a house. The drummer and the
Oh,
guitar
get
player
in on the
slept
house. You wanted to buy a house together with your band?
with my band,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. Oh
And
wow.
the guitar player and the drummer would sleep through. I'd be like, "Oh, we're gonna go look at a house," and they would just sleep through it. I'm like,
They
"Okay,
wouldn't even get up.
you're not in on this." And eventually, it was just me and I did convince the bass player. We did it. The other two of them rented it from us. We rehearsed in the basement. It was awesome. Um, but I was talking to, interestingly enough, the piano tuner at the local university about
Mm.
this decision that I was making to buy a house. And I said, you know what, I'm kind of nervous, and he said, once you have house payments to make, you just don't miss them.
Yes.
You just don't miss them. I don't know, whatever. You just know you got to do that. And some people are
Yes.
going to default on their mortgages, whatever. That is going to happen. But he was right. There's a certain like you have to. You just
Right.
have to.
Yeah,
And so
there's no
you just
choice.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I want to change the subject here over to location. So this is
Hmm.
interesting. You started out San Francisco area.
Hmm.
You went into the Midwest, right?
Yes.
Oberlin, Cleveland, really great places all for music.
Yeah.
Now you're in Austin.
Yeah.
Um, any interesting other destinations to highlight along the way, and did you go California, Midwest California, Austin, or California, Midwest, Austin? How did it progress?
Well, no, it was pretty much what you laid out. We did have the quartet formed while I was at Oberlin.
Hmm.
That's where the Miró Quartet was formed, and then while I did my master's in at the Cleveland Institute, and the quartet was still together, already together. And then the quartet spent 2 years in New York City,
Oh, okay.
doing the graduate assistantship to the Juilliard Quartet. They have a program where you come and be their assistants for 2 years. You get coached by them, and then you also do some coaching when they're out of town, and also lead some other classes, chamber music classes. And I would say that those 2 years in New York were very influential on the quartet. Just being in a big city, being in New York, center of the arts, in the US, and in the Lincoln Center Plaza area, you
Yeah.
can hear the New York Philharmonic, you can hear the Met
Amazing.
Opera, you can hear the American, you see
Yep.
the American Ballet Theater, and then everything happening at Juilliard, and all the guests coming in and out, and during our time there, it was when the quartet also signed with its first management. And so we had a lot of long time relationships that we formed in New York that are still very strong to this day. So we spent 2 years there, and then there was just one, we were very lucky as a quartet. Right after we finished that assistantship, we only were had to spend 1 year where we were homeless, basically playing concerts, but not affiliated with an institution. So
Hmm.
we did that we decided to go relocate to Washington, D.C., still on the East Coast, close to New York. But so we could, we had a lot of relationships with presenters up and down the East Coast. So it was easy for us to jump on a train or take a drive and still play a lot of concerts in Connecticut and Jersey. Um, but after that first 1 year in DC, we got our first teaching job, and that was at Kent State back in Ohio, in Northeast
Hmm.
Ohio. So we went and taught at Kent State for 2 years, and then after the 2 years, the job at here in Austin opened up, and we auditioned for it, and the rest is history. We've been here 22 years now, and it's been a
Oh,
yeah, it's been a
okay.
great. Austin has been an amazing place to raise families, for the quartet to travel in and out of. We're in the middle of the country. We can go west and east, and plenty of big cities nearby: Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, and the university has been just amazing to us. And the string program was kind of fledgling at that time, and we helped kind of build it. And we have a quartet program, the chamber music program. So it's what we saw in the possibility of the Butler School was just there was a lot of potential for growth in terms of the level was already very good, but what we could do in terms of building an audience, building a fan base for chamber music in general, not just for us. And now there's all kinds of things going on in the city. At the Performing Arts Center on the campus. There's Austin Chamber Music Center. Many local chamber music based organizations have sprouted out since we've been here, and so live music capital of the world, as they say here in Austin. But that was
Oh
always
yeah.
more about the punk bands and country music and whatnot. And now I would say that classical music has really grown. The Austin Symphony has grown a lot, and the opera. And so yeah, so it's we did I spent cumulative 9 years in Ohio, and so
Hmm.
Ohio is very close to my heart, and
Hmm.
in terms of my just development as a person, as a musician. So, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So I have some logistical questions. This is fascinating.
Yes.
So, um, when you were at Juilliard, was that a graduate program? Like, did you get a master's degree or
It
something? How did that
was
work?
it's an assistantship, so there's actually no diploma, no degree. It's just, you
Oh,
just
okay.
go there, and yeah, so they financially help you to be in New York, and then you get access to all this great faculty.
Hmm.
Mainly
And
our
you're an
relationship with
assistant. You're an assistant to that quartet. That's the
your
where it
assistant to
comes
the
from.
quartet. If they're out of town, they had us do some lectures for some of their classes. They had us coach some of the groups when they were gone for long periods of time. There's a very interesting thing that they do at Juilliard called the freshman seminar, where they essentially force feed chamber music to all incoming freshman string players. And so literally, like, all the freshman string players would get together in a room, and then they would break up into groups and rehearse a work for a day or two, and then play for each other on Wednesday, starting on Monday and playing Wednesday. And every week you'd be in a different combination with different people. It was really an amazing thing. They're still doing it to this day. And so we would administer a lot of that, where we would help organize the groups and help them pick pieces and things like that. So that gave us our first real, like, teaching experience, where we were in charge of students that were only a few years younger than we were, but we had the experience being a quartet and the knowledge of the repertoire. We could have, oh, this group, you guys should do a Haydn quartet or a Tchaikovsky quartet, and then help them resolve any differences. Most of the time they were 18-year-olds. They just needed help just keeping focus and not like wandering off into some chat land where they're not playing instruments anymore. You come back to the room and they're just hanging out. You say, "Hey guys, you have to play this for the other students on Wednesday. Do you wanna get back to rehearsing your Haydn quartet?" But yeah, so it wasn't a diploma program,
Mhm.
and they still have this to this day, but it's worth its weight in all the experience that you get and
Yeah.
the great musicianship you get to be around.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm fascinated with for some reason this concept, analog concept, I'm making an analog, is
Uh-huh.
that I've seen many people, if you have adult post who have postgraduate degrees, who one of them will get like a position at a university, and they'll
Uh-huh.
actually find a position for the other one. So
Mm.
like for example, the wife is a neuroscientist and she gets a lab, and they say, oh well,
Right.
your husband is an anthropologist and he'll be teaching in the anthropology department. They just do stuff like that for some reason. And
Yeah.
so what I've just found fascinating is that you have this quartet, this group, and that you actually you're finding these opportunities where as a group you are given the opportunity, right? Like you're going and you're doing the assistantship as a group at Juilliard. Oh, you're going to Kent State, and as a group you are a part of the program, and you're going to Austin, and as a group, as opposed to, okay, Daniel got a
Mm-hmm.
job at Austin, and the other folks got jobs at all these other places, and sometimes you try to get together and go on little touring things, but you can't all be in the same place. Or you did Austin and you got a position, but they all moved there and they're doing
Yeah.
something with the symphony. So how common is this with quartets? Because this is not my world. For me, it's fascinating that you can do all this as a group. you
Right.
know
I mean, that's a great question because it seems to be it seems to be a very unique thing for unique to the US actually.
hmm
Um, we spent, especially our earlier years, we spent a lot of time touring in Europe, and we would talk to groups there, and just the thought of a quartet in residence somewhere was just I think it was so foreign to them, and I think that may have changed since then, but it's still not very common. But in the U.S., and I give credit to all the administrators and arts proponents who push and see the value of a quartet in residence. Now you have most of the major music institutions have a quartet. Um,
Hmm.
Juilliard Quartet, of course, may have. I mean, if I think about it, maybe one of the first to form. I mean, the quartet, Juilliard Quartet, exists because of the school, which is why now membership has changed, and it's no longer the same group that was 50, 60, 70 years ago, but it's still there because it's really the school runs it, or is very closely associated with it. You have the Eastman School, you have the Yin Quartet, you have um, uh, in Indiana University of the Pacifica Quartet, like a lot of
Mhm.
and big schools, small schools, a lot of them have that. And um, so all these opportunities that I spoke of, the graduate assistantship at the Juilliard School was made for young quartets, pre-existing quartets that came and auditioned as a quartet. So that's very specific and kind of unique kind of program. But at Kent State, we were the first. They were looking for a string quartet, an existing string quartet. And we were the first one to become a faculty string quartet at Kent. And that
Mhm.
residency, I believe, is still going on. And in Texas, same thing. There was a very visionary. He's now passed just recently. Robert Freeman. He was the president of the Eastman School for 24 years, and he was responsible for the residency that the Cleveland Quartet, our mentors, had back in the 70s and 80s. And so when he left the Eastman School, he ended up at the University of Texas. And he was the dean of the College of Fine Arts here for a good 12 years or so. And one of the first things he did was he raised money here in Texas. He saw the potential. He said Texans love their arts, and Austin especially was ripe for growth, unlike Houston and Dallas, who have already established, large organizations of opera. I know that Austin was just still, small town. It was a small
Mhm.
town, really growing, but he saw this potential and he raised an endowment and said, we need to have a string quartet. Of course, he had to sell this idea to everybody in the area who didn't know, maybe know what a string quartet even was. Um, they knew Willie Nelson, and they knew country music, but so it's really the people who see the value of a string quartet, because as when you hire a string quartet, you immediately get four string faculty. You immediately get faculty who, especially if they're a touring quartet, we tour and we bring the name of the University of Texas, even if we're not there on in the auspices of the university specifically. It's in our bio. We talk about it, and it's really good for recruiting. It's really good for visibility. And the four of us, coordinate the chamber music program, and we know the music, and we know how quartets and chamber music groups work as people groups. We can teach how to resolve differences, how to organize yourselves. Students learn. The music school education, and I know that there's a movement to kind of change that now, but it's been very narrow in that you just come and basically learn how to play your instrument, but no one teaches you how to run a business, promote
Oh, absolutely
yourself,
not. No.
all of those things. We had to learn as a quartet. We had to learn those things by making big, big mistakes, or
Hmm.
taking big chances. And, promotion. Now you have social media and all these things. And so we are able to, because we're always having to stay on the front of that, we have to, be involved in how we promote ourselves or how we relate to our managers and our publicists. We can teach that to our students. So a string quartet is very valuable in that way, just as if you have an orchestral player who's on the faculty who can, really train the future orchestral musicians, you need somebody in chamber music. And chamber music, I think, really, I'm tooting chamber music horn right now. I think it's people are really looking for, especially now with all this internet, like people are looking for more intimate experiences. And I think that's why chamber music I feel like it's having a second, kind of renaissance. And you have a
Hmm.
lot of great, wonderful groups, and they're not all traditional. You have a lot of percussion groups, vocal groups, and they, share all this amazing music and do it in an intimate way, a very personal way, and in a communicative way, which I think I think people are craving that more because more people are spending time in front of computer screens, which is very impersonal. So can be impersonal. Here we are talking on the screen, but a chamber music experience is very human, and
Yeah.
and 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 I think there's a lot to be garnered from that experience, both as educators and as students and as audience, as creators. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the years before the pandemic, it felt like there was a bit of a buzz around people having like house concerts in the
Yes.
classical domain,
Yeah.
piano and chamber music and things. And then of
Hmm.
course, during the pandemic, I'm sure that all just got
That was
totally
like the
thrown
first
out the
thing to go.
window. Yeah.
Sitting in a room with 50 people breathing,
Yeah, get
breathing
close
on
and
each other. Yeah,
personal.
that was going to
Um,
take a while to come back.
Yeah, but I know we still a lot of people have the trauma over it, so they still get uncomfortable in those tight spaces and in those
Yeah.
situations. But I'm sure there's also the counterfactual there where people are also craving to be, so I'm sure it's coming back a little bit and
Yeah.
returning. Hopefully, there's some of what of a resurgence. Yeah, I personally, just love that concept. Just, I mean, could you imagine? I mean, just I think that people are so used to like Netflix and other forms of home entertainment,
Yeah.
like the idea of having like a few musicians in their home playing music personally for them. Maybe they don't even think of it as something exciting, but I
No.
certainly do. And I think
Well,
more people should consider it.
well, actually, yeah. I mean, there's, in every city, I think there's, well, I mean, if you look at even the success during and now the success of like even candlelight concerts, what they've done, they've really just capitalized on the intimate experience. They have the candles, which sets the mood, and then they have music that's familiar and unfamiliar to them. But it's not, you're not bringing in thousands of people. It's a small room, and so there is people definitely are, and they're selling out all the time. You
Hmm.
know, and so, and when we play house concerts, inevitably I always have one or two people that say, I've never sat this close to a string quartet, and whoa, you know, and you know, I've never had this kind of experience. And
Yes.
you can't get that from Netflix. You know, Netflix is gonna the show's gonna play the same way, and whether you give it energy or not,
Right.
there's no interaction. You
Yes,
know,
that is
where
very
it's
true. Yeah.
and you know, when we're playing a house concert, we can feel the energy.
Yeah.
We can feel when the audience is maybe falling asleep and we need to up our
Hmm.
energy, or we can feel
Hmm.
when they're right with us, you know, and
Yeah.
I think that kind of intimate interaction between the audience and performers will never go away. But
Hmm.
knock on wood, I just don't think they can never be replaced by what, AI? No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what I'm thinking of this, but I remember during the pandemic, or sort of post-pandemic, whatever, somebody made the comment, you lost the sense of smell actually, right? So, you might meet someone, engage with them over Zoom, and then you meet them in person, and be like, oh, so that's what you smell like. You know what I mean? It's like maybe they smell good,
Right.
maybe they smell bad. I don't know. But like, and I think, we're talking
That's
about
interesting.
music here, but for some reason that's going through my head. Like you have bodies in a room, and you
Right.
whatever smell, of human beings, or somebody's wearing perfume, or whatever.
Right.
And the heat, the temperature goes up in there, it gets
Yeah.
crowded, you crack a window, you feel the breeze, like all these kind of wonderful aspects of being in a room with people.
Yeah.
The ups and downs of it are also a collateral to it. And I also am recalling, or sort of enjoying here as we talk about it, the connection with history, you know,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
this comes from, hundreds of years ago, people doing the same thing, just get in a room, have some musicians, and just kind of hang out and enjoy the beauty of music,
Especially if you're
together.
playing Mozart or Haydn quartet or something, you're like, you know
Absolutely.
how many hundreds of thousands of times this quartet has probably been enjoyed in a room with people throughout history. That's so
Hmm.
cool, and we're part of it. And 100 years from now, some other group will be playing the same quartet for somebody else in a different way. That is very cool. I think you bring up a good point that yeah, uh, part of part of the human history basically.
There's a connection, yeah.
It's a connection. It's like watching a live play rather than watching it on a movie screen or something.
So, one thing that I'm going back to the sort of geography of all this, one of the things that
Yeah.
I'm finding fascinating is, I know a lot of people in California for some reason, San Francisco,
Yeah.
Los Angeles area. As a matter of fact, I have a group of piano tuners in New York City,
Mhm.
and I keep bringing people come and they show up and they want to be part of the team, and they're from California. It's kind of crazy, but
Yeah.
so anyways, I connected with a lot of people, and I'm seeing a lot of people with probably around in the pandemic, post-pandemic, they're actually moving from California
Hmm.
to Texas. So that was interesting to hear from you. That's not what you did. You
No.
actually did a roundabout thing. You ended up in
Yeah.
Texas many years ago before this
Yeah.
recent shift. And it sounds like you almost had the capacity to be a part of whatever types of bubbling up that's been happening, right?
Yeah.
Because I looked it up and it looked like, South by Southwest, yes, maybe the
Hmm.
first one happened in like the late 80s or something like
Right.
that. But
Right.
it didn't really start to gain momentum and go parabolic,
Yeah.
until probably when you started to kind of arrive in the area. Yeah.
Well, what can I say? We are part of that. No.
Yeah, I mean, you were.
No, no,
I mean,
no,
really
no.
interestingly,
But yeah.
no, but I'm sure you were. I mean, just like you said, there was something bubbling up where they said, "Hey, at the local university, we want to have a resident quartet. We
Yeah.
want more classical music. Yes, you didn't lead the movement, but it's cultural. It's the arts. It's the sciences, the technology. It's
Yes.
entrepreneurship. But you certainly have played some role in that, change, and at least been able to simmer in it.
Yeah. I don't know. You make a good observation. I mean, growing up in California, did I think about any other state except California? Not really. I said, isn't this the whole country? But yeah, Texas was not on my mind at all. I didn't know anything about Texas. I remember having a friend in high school who had come from San Antonio. He had just moved, and he was just a big, a Cowboys and Spurs fan. And I was like, who, what is that? Are those sports teams? What are they? Texas was not on my mind, but as 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 we slowly made our way through, the history of the quartet and ended up in Texas, and now looking back at it, yes, you're right. Especially the last 20 years, when it's not an accident, I think, that this dean had this idea of, you know, having a quartet in residence at the university, and then also finding the resources to do it and having enough people to contribute to it. And he had this far-fetched idea of raising a $6 million endowment to just fund for the string quartet position, and he was able to do that because he saw something on the wall. He saw the writing on the wall. There are people who are craving that, and also there's a pride here in Austin, being a small city. It's like, why can't we have this? Why? And then, of course, in the last 20 years, you've had a lot of businesses move here. A lot of businesses have started. You were having a Whole Foods lunch, which is an Austin institution. It's headquartered here in Austin, and so,
Oh,
like,
I didn't realize.
yeah, the mothership, Whole Foods, is 15 minutes from me, and so Austin is very cool. It has its Texas roots, but it also has a lot of, like, newer vibe. There's Texas old roots, meaning maybe oil money kind of, and that's more Dallas and Houston, but then has all this high tech stuff. I mean, you have, Dell has been here since the beginning of time. Dell was a
Mm,
graduate of the UT, and he started it
mm,
in Round Rock, which is just north of Austin here. But then you have all the major tech companies, so it's kind of newer money. It's basically Silicon Valley 2, I guess you
hmm
would say. And then with that came people who were probably used to, we've had a lot of Bay Area folks move here, and they were used to chamber music, symphony, and blah blah blah. And I
hmm
think that brought when they moved here, they brought that kind of openness and want for the arts. And so raising money for the arts here in Austin specifically, I think, not that it's easy, but there's a lot of, willingness to do that and take pride in it. So, like, the Austin Symphony, before we got here, didn't really have its own home. But 15 years ago, the Long Center, Joe and Teresa Long are big philanthropists here in Austin. They funded and led the charge for a performing arts center, and that's now the symphony has a home, but it also is a place for other orchestras to come by. And Perlman gave a recital just recently, and you have recitals there and plays. There's a art box there, and a play for plays. So you're right. It's not an accident that we came here right at the beginning, and we've seen it. We've seen the city really grow in that way, and it's been very exciting. And in South by Southwest, I think, is kind of a thermometer to that growth. Now it's become such a big player in the media scene, and not just arts, but film and then tech and all these things. And Austin City Limits, the other big music festival, has always been on the map, and it's enjoyed. It's also growth, and as they say, rising tide, raises all ships, and that's really what's happened here. And we have a lot of graduates from the Butler School who stay here and have started a lot of their own organizations,
hmm
arts organizations, musical organizations, and there's a place for everybody here in that way. So
Yeah.
we feel very lucky. We feel extremely lucky to be here, and to be both a part of its growth and also enjoy its growth. Yeah,
So it's been great just chatting with you. And I have to be
yeah,
honest with you, some people who can play music cannot have a chat. It's just those things do not necessarily go hand in hand. Like,
right.
oh, it's beautiful. And then you try to talk to them, and clearly they
They're
put all
like,
their focus in making the instrument work. But yeah, but I would love to hear the music. You guys just recently got nominated for a Grammy Award, and congratulations, such a privilege,
thank you.
and an honor. I'm sure well deserved. Can we listen a little bit? You want to talk about the music, play a little bit of
Yeah,
music, give us some context?
yeah. So our latest album, which came out last May, it's almost a year old now, but is entitled Home. And We got the name from, so the genesis. I'll just talk very quickly about the genesis of the album itself. We have enjoyed, speaking of the Butler School in UT Austin, we've enjoyed a 20 plus year relationship with the composer Kevin Putz, who's very well known now. He's enjoyed great success, and his star is already risen and is still rising. You know, he had an opera debut with the Met back in December of 23, and he's just and he that album was also nominated for a Grammy, the DG album of his opera. So we met him here in at Austin. He was teaching here, finishing his teaching gig here when we first came in 2003. And so we made our acquaintance with him, and then over the years we've worked on several commissions with him. He's written us two quartets and a quartet concerto. And this latest quartet is entitled Home. He was moved by the migration crisis 10 years ago in Europe, when Syrians and Iraqis were pushed out by war, moving into, if you remember, they were all just left their homes and just wandered into Eastern Europe, and luckily Eastern Europe took them in. But he saw these images of families and children and people just uprooted and literally carrying what they owned on their backs and didn't know where they were going to go. So this gave him spurred his idea of what home is. And so the title work, Home, there are other pieces on this album, but I can play us just a little bit of the opening of Home. And this is very much Kevin's why we fell in love with Kevin's language. His compositional language is very warm, almost cinematic music, and it's depicting, the opening of this work is about what home may be to all of us, which is a place of safety and love and warmth. So I'll play a little bit of this. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this correctly. All right.
Looks like it's working. I can't hear anything yet. There we go.
Anyway, I thought I'd wait for us to get back to C major.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
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 I'm just inspired to breathe, like listening to it. You can hear, you musicians taking breaths, and that I could, that's wonderful to hear. And then, but also the tenor of the music kind of lends itself to just like, okay, just take a breath.
Yes. 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 And just the pure economy of his writing. There's not much really going on, but you feel so much, and that's really
Hmm.
for us. That's why we just gravitated toward Kevin as a composer. You know, he's a great friend, as personal friend of ours as well. But it's the music is just really speaks so much, and just he just it's not overly complicated. You know, it does get complicated later in the work. But yeah, so that piece is the centerpiece. But we also have another work by the Pulitzer Prize winning composer Caroline Shaw. She wrote us a work called Microfictions, and during the this was a pretty much a very much a pandemic inspired work, in that she during the pandemic we were all on Zooms like this, and she was, you know, as a composer was looking for inspiration, and she knew she was going to write this quartet for us. So one day I think she was kind of browsing Instagram or Twitter, X now, and she ran upon this author named T.R. Darling, a sci-fi writer. He was beating boredom by challenging himself to write micro fictions, little stories with the
Hmm.
144 character limit of
Oh,
Twitter.
okay.
So they
Nice.
essentially were just little poems.
Yes.
And so she saw this and she said, I'm going to write microfictions. So she wrote her own set of microfictions, words, seven different microfictions, and then she put six of them to music, and that became the other quartet that's on one of the other new works that's on that same album called Microfictions Volume One. Because then I think she left the door open for herself to be able to write Volume Two, Three, Four, and
Hmm.
she's written I think three of them already, and they are for different. Like I think Volume Two might be for orchestra, Volume Three might be for some other combination, not all quartet. So that work. Do you want to hear a little bit of that one? I don't know.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah, we
Okay,
got a minute.
since we've talked about it. And so let me see. Um, I'll play you the second one, and it's her voice reading the microfictions in our recording.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go.
The photographs smeared into focus one by one, like organ pipes being tuned. Some of the edges and corners were torn, but the tune was still visible.
Cool.
Anyway, a little sample of that work, and you can hear, you know, the photographs smeared into focus one by one is the words, and
Hmm.
at the beginning you kind of get the smearing, and then all of a sudden you get tonality, and then it
Hmm.
pulls apart, and the whole movement kind of does that. And so each one of these has a little bit, and she's incredibly creative, and some of them are very witty. Some of the stories are very witty, and the music is witty, and so that's, you know, a completely kind of different way of expressing. You know, Kevin has his kind of heartfelt, you know, wearing the heart on the sleeve kind of thing, and she's more witty and more
Hmm.
light and almost observing things as a, you know, third party kind of thing. And so these two composers, we just love that combination of the two of them, and both of them are again really leading. I would say right now leading this generation of American voices, in terms of composition. And then we have the Barber Quartet, which has the famous Barber Adagio, another American, you know, voice, one from the past. We have a movement of the George Walker String Quartet, which this movement is essentially the George Walker, a black American composer. He wrote this work, this particular slow movement that we have on the album in memory of his grandmother, and it basically has similar life to the Barber Adagio. Was the slow movement in his string quartet and became a string orchestra piece, and it became famous, much more famous than it did in the string orchestra form. But we play it in its original quartet form, and then we end with a little encore, another American voice, and that's from the American Songbook, "Over the Rainbow." We have this amazing arrangement, an amazing arrangement of the "Over the Rainbow," and so people can go on. The album at home is streamable on all the platforms, and you can go and hear it all there.
Wonderful. And would you search Miró Quartet? Because I'm sure there's a lot of things called home.
Yeah. If you just I think if you just type Miró Quartet home, it will just pop right up. Yeah.
Perfect.
And so, yep. And we were, as you mentioned, very honored and thrilled and happy and proud to be nominated for the Grammy. We were able to go to the ceremony in February. Didn't win for the album, but just to be one of 5 in chamber music we were ecstatic, and we just think this music, not so much about us, but this music that's represented on it deserves to be heard. The most famous one being the "Over the Rainbow," the next famous one being the Adagio for strings. But how many people have heard it actually in the string quartet form? And then you have these 2 new works, and George Walker's his version of Adagio for strings, essentially, and so lyric for strings is George Walker's work. So, yeah.
Well, "Somewhere Over the Rainbows," that is one of my favorites to kind of just noodle on. Can we hear a little bit of that one too?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a great tune.
It is an amazing
My
tune.
son just watched Wizard of Oz for the first time like a week ago too. It's cute.
A timeless. So,
Great movie.
Yeah. And beautiful song. So this starts with a second violin solo of a verse that's not heard in the movie. So Ella Fitzgerald recorded the song, and you can hear her sing this part of the song. We all know the chorus, but so you'll hear a little bit of the part that's not often heard.
Lovely. Thank you. That was great. Yeah, great. I love the starting it kind of like, this sounds somewhat familiar. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We probably should wrap up here. It's been about the hour. But it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and hope to hear more in the future. Would love to give you the opportunity to mention, where you'd like to send people. Of course, you mentioned the album. Go listen to it on Spotify. Any words of wisdom, parting thoughts, other places to send people?
No. I mean, our website has a lot, all the things that we're doing, concert dates and albums, miroquartet.com, MIRO quartet.com. I guess we can kind of tease a little bit. future recordings, we actually have in the can all three Alberto Ginastera quartets. Ginastera, pretty much the preeminent Argentinian classical composer from the 20th century. Amazing quartets. A little bit of Bartok, a little Stravinsky, and just full on South American rhythmic intensity. And so that album is coming out this summer. And we are actually working on a holiday album. And that's good. That's I can't give you more than that, but watch for that. So yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you. We will outro material. I'll run through here and then we'll end the call. But yeah, we've reached the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. And thanks again to Daniel for joining us, as well as our live participants today. As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that joined us today by signing up for a session individually, hey, Mike, make your life more convenient. Subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour at just $16 a month. Get the recording of today's session in a member area, automatic registration for each week's new session. Sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH. Don't forget about the podcast, the blog, the social medias, and what did I miss? I don't think I missed anything. The master classes, our monthly master class. We've got another great one coming up this week. Okay, guys, we'll see you again next